The boy who walked through the gate, his rubber slippers squeaked against polished marble floors, and the sound echoed down the entire corridor like an announcement. He is here. He does not belong. Samuel stopped walking around him. Children in crisp cream uniforms moved like they owned the air itself. Leather shoes, pressed collars, backpacks that probably cost more than everything Grandma Agnes had ever owned in her entire life. The corridor smelled of something clean and expensive, like the inside of a shop he had never been allowed to enter. Somewhere behind him, a girl giggled. Somewhere to his left, a boy whispered something to his friend, and they both glanced at his feet. Sam looked down at his slippers. Then he looked up, and at the far end of the corridor, standing on her toes, waving both arms like she was flagging down a bus, was Izzy. She was grinning so wide it looked like her face might split in two. She had saved a spot beside her. She had been waiting. And just like that, the marble floor felt slightly less cold. Sam exhaled slowly and walked forward. But if you're just tuning into this channel, please subscribe and turn on your notification bell so you never miss a story like this one. And if this kind of storytelling moves you, please like this video. It truly helps us keep bringing these powerful stories to life. Now, let's go back to Samuel, because his story is only just beginning. The first morning was a lesson in everything Sam did not know, not mathematics, not science, not English grammar. Those he had swallowed whole from torn textbooks fished out of dustbins and from lessons absorbed through school fences. No, what Samuel did not know was how to exist in a world built for people who had never been hungry. He did not know which fork to use at the dining hall. He sat down with his tray and looked at two forks placed side by side and felt a cold panic bloom in his chest. Izzy leaned over quietly without making a scene and whispered, "Outside one first, always." He nodded. He filed it away. He would not need to be told twice. He did not know that you were supposed to raise your hand before speaking in class. At the fence, he had always just answered inside his own head, silently, quickly, the answer arriving before the teacher even finished the question. So when Mr. Obi, the mathematics teacher, wrote a quadratic equation on the board and the class went quiet and Sam simply said the answer aloud without thinking, the room turned to stare at him like he had spoken in tongues. Mr. Obi turned slowly from the board. He was a compact man with rectangular glasses and the permanently tired expression of someone who had been explaining the same concepts for 20 years. He looked at Sam, then at the board, then back at Sam. "Would you like to come up and show your working?" he said carefully. Sam stood. He walked to the board, he picked up the chalk, and in 60 seconds he solved the problem completely, clearly, and correctly in a method Mr. Obi had never seen before, a shortcut the boy had invented himself in the dust of Ogbeat Market because he had no textbook to show him the long way. The class was silent. Mr. Obi took off his glasses, cleaned them, put them back on. "Where did you learn that method?" Sam shrugged. "I made it up, sir," someone at the back of the class scoffed. It was Tobchukwu Tobe, a broad-shouldered boy with light skin and the particular arrogance that comes from never once being told no. He sat in the back row with two friends who functioned mostly as an audience for whatever he decided to perform that day. "He made it up," Tobe repeated, smiling at his friends. "The market boy made it up." Sam did not turn around. He set the chalk down and returned to his seat. Izzy shot Tobe a look that could have cut glass. Tobe smiled back at her pleasantly, unbothered, the way people smile when they have never faced a consequence in their lives. Those first weeks moved like a river with rocks in it, fast, unpredictable, and occasionally painful. Sam woke every morning in the school hostel in a bed that was softer than anything he had ever slept on and lay there for a few minutes feeling guilty about it. Then he got up, made his bed with military precision the way Grandma Agnes had always insisted even when their bed was a mat on a concrete floor, and got ready for the day. He was always the first student in every classroom. He liked the quiet before the others arrived, the way the morning light came through the windows and fell across the empty desks. He would sit and review his notes and sometimes just close his eyes and remind himself that this was real, that he was here, that nobody was going to come and take it away. But Tobe did his best to try. It was not always loud. That was the difficult thing about Tobe. Sometimes it was subtle, a slight emphasis on the word scholarship whenever he mentioned Sam to others. A casual observation about Sam's second-hand shoes made just loudly enough to carry. A comment during group work about how some people had theoretical intelligence but lacked real-world polish, delivered with a pleasant smile directed precisely at Sam. Sam absorbed it all without reaction. He had spent years being invisible on the streets of Ogbeat. He knew how to make himself small, but Izzy could not do small. Izzy had never learned small. It to his face, she told Tobe one afternoon in the corridor, stepping squarely into his path, arms folded. Whatever you keep whispering about him, say it properly, Tobe blinked. He had not expected this from Izzy Harlow, who had always been quiet, polite, invisible in her own way. Relax, Izzy, I'm just making observations. Your observations are cowardly, she said flatly. Then she turned and walked away. The corridor was very quiet for a moment. Sam fell into step beside her. You didn't have to do that. I know, she said. I wanted to. He looked at her sideways. You lost 2 friends last week defending me, she shrugged. They weren't real friends. You taught me the difference, remember. Real friends don't disappear when things get uncomfortable. She glanced at him. You taught me that under the mango tree. Sam was quiet for a moment. Then he said, you were already paying attention. I just gave you the words. She smiled at that. It was the kind of smile that had nothing to do with happiness and everything to do with recognition. The feeling of being seen accurately by another person. It was, Sam had come to understand, Izzy's rarest expression and her most honest one. Every Friday evening without fail, Sam left the school compound and walked to the care facility where Grandma Agnes now lived. Chief Harlow had arranged it 3 weeks after enrolling Sam. A quiet, clean facility on the gentler side of Enugu, run by a woman named Nurse Kioma, who had soft hands and a loud laugh, and who called all her patients my darling regardless of age or gender. Grandma Agnes had been suspicious at first, the way she was suspicious of anything she hadn't seen coming. But Nurse Kioma had offered her a bowl of oaf onigbu on the first day, and after that Grandma Agnes had decided the place was acceptable. Sam always brought something when he visited. Groundnuts because she loved them. A biscuit from the school dining hall saved from his own lunch. Sometimes just a story from the week, something funny, something small because her face changed when he made her laugh. It became younger. He could see the woman she had been before age and grief had settled into her bones. But lately, the stories were taking longer to reach her. He would begin a sentence and watch her eyes drift sideways, chasing something invisible. He would say her name and she would turn back and smile, but the smile was slightly uncertain, like she was smiling at someone she almost recognized. Some evenings she called him by his father's name. Some evenings she asked him when his mother was coming home. Those evenings Sam would sit very still and say softly, "Soon, Grandma. Soon." Then he would hold her hand and they would sit together as the sun went down, and he would feel the particular loneliness of loving someone who is slowly becoming a stranger to you. He never cried in front of her. He cried on the bus back to school, quietly, facing the window, while the lights of Enugu blurred past him. It was on one of those Friday evenings that everything shifted. Sam had just arrived at the facility and was signing in at the front desk when Nurse Kioma appeared from the corridor with an expression he had not seen on her face before. Controlled, careful. She had an episode this afternoon, Nurse Kioma said quietly. She became very confused, very distressed. We managed it, she's resting now. But her blood pressure was very high and the doctor wants to run more tests tomorrow. Sam felt the floor tilt slightly beneath him. Can I see her? She's sleeping. But yes, briefly. He stood in the doorway of her room and looked at her small form under the white blanket, her chest rising and falling, her hands folded on top of the sheet the way she always slept, as though even unconscious she was keeping everything tidy. He stayed until Nurse Kioma gently touched his shoulder and told him he should go back to school and rest. He was sitting outside the facility on a low concrete step, backpack between his knees, staring at nothing, when a black SUV pulled into the compound and parked. The door opened. Chief Richard Harlow stepped out alone. No driver, no assistant. He was wearing a simple dark shirt and trousers, not his usual compound presence of authority and expensive fabric. He looked almost ordinary. He walked straight past the reception and into the facility, and Sam heard him ask for Grandma Agnes's doctor. Sam sat very still. 20 minutes passed. Then Chief Harlow came back outside and stood on the step beside Sam without a word. He looked out at the quiet street. A hawker passed with a tray of oranges. A motorcycle puttered by. The evening was warm and ordinary, and Sam's grandmother was inside losing herself piece by piece, and somehow this man had driven here alone, without being asked, and Sam did not know what to do with that. "She is strong," Chief Harlow said finally. "The doctor says her heart is good. It's only the memory that is fighting her." Sam nodded slowly. A long silence opened between them, the kind that is not empty but full of things neither of them had the language for yet. Then Chief Harlow sat down on the step beside Sam, a billionaire in a dark shirt sitting on a concrete step outside a care facility in the Enugu evening. He folded his hands. "She raised you well," he said quietly. "A woman who raised a boy like you in those conditions, that is not a small thing. That is everything." Sam's throat tightened. He pressed his lips together hard. Chief Harlow turned to look at him then directly, the way he had looked at Sam the very first day in his compound, like he was calculating something, not a business figure but a depth. Like he was measuring the distance between what this boy had survived and what this boy could become. "Sit down, son," he said. Sam blinked. He was already sitting, but he understood what the man meant. It was not an instruction, it was an arrival. It was Chief Richard Harlow, one of Enugu's most powerful and guarded men, opening a door he had never opened for anyone outside his own blood. Sam looked at him. Something shifted in his chest, something old and knotted and heavy that had lived there so long he had forgotten it wasn't supposed to be there. He swallowed hard, and he sat. The doctor's name was Dr. Emeka Ez, and he had kind eyes and the habit of pausing before delivering difficult news, as though he was giving the words one last chance to soften before they landed. He paused for a long time before speaking to Sam. "The condition is called vascular dementia," he said carefully. "It means the memory loss is not simply age. The small blood vessels in the brain are weakening. It will progress." Another pause. "We can slow it. We cannot stop it." Sam sat in the plastic chair across from the doctor's desk and kept his face very still. He had learned the art of receiving pain without showing it, on the streets of Ogbit Market, where showing pain was an invitation for more of it. He nodded. He asked 2 or 3 precise questions. He thanked the doctor. Then he walked out into the corridor, sat down on a bench against the wall, and stared at the floor tiles for a very long time. It was Izzy who found him there an hour later. She had taken a taxi from the school compound the moment his name stopped appearing on the hostel sign-in sheet, and 2 plus 2 became 4 in her mind. She sat down beside him without a word, the way people sit beside each other when words are not the thing that is needed. After a while Sam said, "She won't remember me eventually." Izzy was quiet. "She's already calling me by my father's name sometimes." His voice was flat, controlled, giving nothing away except to someone listening carefully. "One day she'll look at me and see a stranger." Izzy looked at her hands. "My mother left when I was 6, she said. She just stopped coming home, no illness, no accident, she simply chose to go." She paused. "For years I kept her face in my head, practiced it every morning like a prayer, but I've started forgetting what she actually looked like. Not who she was, just her face." She looked at Sam. "The people we love don't only live in our memories of them, they live in what they made us. Your grandmother made you, Sam, all of you. That part doesn't fade." Sam looked at her for a long moment, then he said quietly, "How are you this wise and still failing mathematics?" Izzy burst out laughing, startled, genuine, slightly scandalized. And Sam smiled, small and real and tired. The first smile he had managed all day. 2 weeks later, Chief Harlow moved Grandma Agnes. He did it without announcement or ceremony. He simply informed Sam one Thursday evening that arrangements had been made for Agnes to be transferred to a private care facility 7 minutes from the Harlow compound. A smaller, quieter place with a garden and a woman named Sister Bridget who had spent 30 years caring for elderly patients, and who, Chief Harlow said with a straight face, made the best pepper soup in Enugu State. "Why?" Sam asked. Chief Harlow looked at him steadily. so you can see her every day if you need to. Not just Fridays. Sam opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Sir, it is already done, Chief Harlow said simply and picked up his newspaper. Sam stood in the doorway of the study for another moment. Then he said very quietly, Thank you, sir. Chief Harlow did not look up from his newspaper, but the corner of his mouth moved, just slightly, just enough. With Grandma Agnes settled and close, something unlocked in Sam. It was as though he had been running a race with one hand pressed against a wound the entire time, and now he could finally use both arms. He threw himself into his studies with a focus that made even Mr. Obi stop mid-lesson and watch him with the quiet reverence of a man witnessing something he had only read about in books. Mathematics was his native language, always had been, but now the rest of the curriculum opened up like rooms he had always known existed, but never been allowed to enter. Physics, chemistry, technical drawing. He devoured them. He stayed in the library after lights out with a torch Izzy had smuggled in for him. He filled notebooks with calculations and diagrams and questions he had been carrying in his head for years. Questions that had been born in Ogbeat Market, watching a bridge and wondering how it held its own weight, watching a collapsed building and understanding instinctively that something in the foundation had been wrong. He wanted to build things. Not just understand them, build them, strong things, permanent things. The kind of things that told the children who came after him, you are allowed to stay. This was made for you. You will not be moved. Izzy watched his transformation with quiet pride. She was finding her own footing too, slower, less dramatic, but real. Her mathematics had improved so dramatically under Sam's continued tutoring that Mr. Obi had moved her 2 seats forward in the classroom, which in his particular ecosystem was the equivalent of a standing ovation. She had also discovered, somewhat to her own surprise, that she had a gift for argument, for seeing the shape of an injustice and nomming it precisely and refusing to let it go. This gift announced itself publicly on a Tuesday afternoon in the school courtyard. Tobe had finally made his move. He had printed an old photograph, Sam, perhaps 10 years old, barefoot and dusty, hawking groundnuts on a busy Ogbeat street, a look of fierce concentration on his young face, and pinned it to the main notice board outside the administrative block with a handwritten caption beneath it. Our new scholarship boy. Welcome to Harlow British. By the time Sam arrived at the notice board, a crowd had gathered. Some were laughing. Some were just watching with the particular discomfort of people who know something is wrong but have not yet decided if it is worth the cost of saying so. Sam stopped. He looked at the photograph for a long moment. He looked at his own young face, the set jaw, the careful eyes, the groundnut tray balanced with practiced precision. He remembered that day. He remembered the exact temperature of the sun. He remembered being hungry. Then he stepped forward, unpinned the photograph from the board, and turned to face the crowd. The courtyard went very quiet. Yes, Sam said. His voice was calm and clear and carried without effort to every corner of the space. That was me, Ogbeat Market. I was 10. I was hungry most days and I had never sat inside a classroom in my life. He looked at the photograph one more time. And I was still working out equations in my head that most of you cannot solve with a textbook in front of you. No one spoke, so yes. He held the photograph up briefly. This is where I came from. I'm not ashamed of it. The market taught me more about how the world actually works than most people learn in a lifetime. He lowered the photograph. The only embarrassing thing in this courtyard right now is whoever thought this would break me. He folded the photograph carefully and put it in his pocket. Then he walked away. For exactly 2 seconds the courtyard was completely silent. Then Izzy clapped. One sharp, deliberate clap. Then another student joined. Then another. Then the sound built until it filled the courtyard and washed up against the walls, and Tobe stood at the back of the crowd with his pleasant smile gone for the first time Sam had ever seen. That evening Chief Harlow called Sam into the study. Sam expected a conversation about the incident. He had been told by one of the teachers that the school had reported it to the chief as Izzy's father and the institution's primary patron. Sat down across from the large mahogany desk and prepared himself. But Chief Harlow did not mention the courtyard. Instead, he was quiet for a moment, studying Sam with that measuring look. Then he leaned back in his chair and said, "How old were you when your parents died?" Sam blinked. "4, sir." Agnes took you immediately. "Yes, sir. She sold her sewing machine to pay for their burial. Then she took me to Ogbeat and started selling ground nuts." Chief Harlow absorbed this. "She gave up everything." "Everything she had, sir, which wasn't much, but yes." Another silence. Then Chief Harlow said, "When I was 9 years old, I carried cement on a construction site in Onitsha for 3 naira a day. My father was dead. My mother was sick. I had 4 younger siblings." He said it the way men say things they have made peace with, not for sympathy, just for accuracy. "I told myself every single day on that site that I was building something. Not the wall, something else." "I didn't have a word for it then." Sam watched him. "Dignity," Chief Harlow said quietly. "I was building dignity, brick by brick, day by day, in the only way available to me." He looked at Sam directly. "You've been doing the same thing since you were 4 years old. You just didn't have anyone to tell you that it had a name." Sam's jaw tightened. He held the chief's gaze and said nothing because there was nothing to say that the silence wasn't already saying better. Chief Harlow nodded slowly, as though something had been confirmed. "The incident today at school," he said. "You handled it well." "I just told the truth, sir," Chief Harlow said. "That is usually the most powerful thing a person can do." 3 weeks later, the newspaper story broke. Billionaire's secret charity case, Street Boy Living in Harlow Mansion. It was published by a mid-sized Lagos entertainment blog and picked up within hours by 3 larger outlets. The framing was breathless and slightly cruel. Sources close to the Harlow household describing Sam as a project, a calculated PR move, a street boy being groomed for publicity purposes. There were photos taken from a distance. Sam in his school uniform entering the compound gates. Sam beside Izzy at what appeared to be a school event. Social media split immediately and cleanly down the middle. On one side, "This is beautiful. Chief Harlow is using his wealth to change a life. This is what the rich should be doing." On the other, "This child is not a charity project. Why is a billionaire parading a poor boy for clout? Where is the boy's real family?" That last question, "Where is the boy's real family?" was the one that caught. Because somewhere in Onitsha, a man named Ikena Adiz read that question and decided it was time to provide an answer. Sam was in the middle of a physics class when the school secretary appeared at the classroom door and asked him to come to the administrative office. He gathered his notebook without urgency, assuming it was something routine, a form to sign, a message from Nurse Kioma about Grandma Agnes. He walked into the administrative office and stopped. A man was sitting in the visitor's chair. He was perhaps 45, lean, with sharp cheekbones and the carefully assembled appearance of someone who had dressed with intention for this particular meeting. His shoes were new. His shirt was ironed. His hands rested on his knees with a deliberate, practiced stillness. He looked up when Sam entered and his face arranged itself into something that was attempting warmth but landing closer to calculation. "Samuel," the man said, "you've grown so much." Sam stood at the door. His eyes moved to the school administrator, Mrs. Okonkwo, who sat behind her desk with the expression of someone caught between professional neutrality and personal discomfort. She said carefully, "Samuel, this gentleman says he is your father's brother, your uncle." Sam looked back at the man. "I don't have an uncle," he said. The man smiled. It did not reach his eyes. "Your father and I were not close in his final years. I understand that. But blood is blood, Samuel. I have been looking for you for a long time." He paused. "I came as soon as I heard you were found. As soon as I heard you were found." Sam turned those words over slowly. He had not been lost. He had been on the streets of Ogbeat Market for 8 years hawking ground nuts and sleeping under a bridge, and at no point during those 8 years had any blood relative appeared with this level of shoe polish and this much careful stillness. "You look just like your father," the man said softly, leaning forward slightly as though this were the thing that would unlock something in Sam. As though resemblance were the same as love. Sam looked at him for a long, quiet moment. Then he said, "I don't have a father." The man's smile stayed in place. "Not anymore, but you have me." And the room became very still. Ikena Adiz moved fast. Within 48 hours of that first meeting in the administrative office, he had retained a lawyer, a loud, performative man named Barrister Chuka, who gave interviews to entertainment blogs before he had filed a single document. Within a week, the legal claim was formally submitted to the Enugu family court. The language was careful and deliberate. The minor Samuel Adiz is the biological nephew of the claimant, whose right to guardianship supersedes that of any non-biological party regardless of financial arrangement. The city buzzed. Social media, which had already been circling the story like a hawk over a field, now dove completely. Opinions split louder than before. Radio stations in Enugu ran call-in segments. A pastor in Agbani used Sam's story as a Sunday sermon illustration about the dangers of allowing wealthy men to purchase other people's children. A university lecturer in Nsukka wrote an op-ed arguing the opposite, that blood ties without relational history carried no moral weight whatsoever. Sam read none of it. He sat in the library every evening with his notebooks and his textbooks and his torch, and he worked. Because the work was the one thing that belonged entirely to him, the one space no lawyer, no blogger, no long-lost uncle with new shoes could enter and rearrange. Numbers did not care who your father was. Structures did not care where you slept as a child. A correctly solved equation was correct regardless of what was happening in the courtroom across town, but the nights were harder than the days. He lay in his hostile bed in the dark and stared at the ceiling and felt the old familiar weight settling back onto his chest. The weight he thought he had finally begun to put down. The fear that everything good was temporary, that the floor would shift again, that he would wake up one morning and the marble corridor and the school uniform and Mr. Obi's stunned face and Izzy's laugh would dissolve like something he had only dreamed, and he would be back under the bridge in Ogbit with the rain coming in sideways and Grandma Agnes coughing beside him. It was Grandma Agnes herself who steadied him. Not with wisdom, her words came and went now like radio signals in bad weather, but with her presence. He visited her every afternoon after school and sat beside her in the garden of Sister Bridget's facility, and sometimes she knew him and sometimes she didn't, and on the days she didn't he simply held her hand and watched the garden with her and let her be wherever her mind had taken her. One afternoon she turned to him with perfectly clear eyes and said, "Samuel, you are worrying." He looked at her. "I'm fine, Grandma." "You are worrying," she repeated firmly with the particular authority of a woman who had wiped his tears for 8 years and knew the geography of his face better than he did. "Whatever it is, stop. You were born in trouble. Trouble is not new to you. You have walked through every storm so far." She squeezed his hand. "This one is no different." He swallowed hard. "What if I lose everything, Grandma?" She looked at him steadily. "Then you will still have what you came with. Your mind, your character, your God." She patted his hand. "Nobody can take those, not even a judge." He nodded slowly. She was already drifting again by the time he stood to leave, her eyes going soft and distant, her lips moving slightly around a song he half recognized from childhood. He kissed her forehead and walked out into the afternoon and stood in the sun for a moment with his eyes closed. Then he straightened his collar and went back to school. Chief Harlow's legal team was led by a woman named Barrister Ngozi Okafor, small, precise, and utterly without theatrical performance in a courtroom, which made her approximately twice as dangerous as Barrister Chuka. She met with Sam 3 times before the hearing, each session careful and thorough, building the factual record of Ikena's complete absence from Sam's life. The facts were not difficult to establish. In 8 years of street life, not once had Ikena Adiz appeared. Not when Sam's parents died. Not when Sam was 4 years old and Grandma Agnes sold her sewing machine to bury her son. Not when Sam was 7 and sleeping under a bridge. Not when Sam was 10 and hawking groundnuts in traffic. Not when Sam was 12 and teaching a billionaire's daughter mathematics through a school fence. Ikena's lawyers argued that he had not known Sam's whereabouts. Barrister Ngozi produced 3 separate neighbors from the Ogbit area who confirmed that Sam and Agnes had been visible and present in the same location for the better part of 6 years. She produced a market association record showing Agnes's groundnut stall registered at the same spot for 7 consecutive years. He knew where to look, she said simply. He chose not to. But the court, as courts do, reserved its final weight for one thing: the testimony of Samuel himself. The courtroom was smaller than Sam had imagined. He had built it up in his mind into something vast and crushing, but it was an ordinary room with wooden benches and a slowly turning overhead fan, and a judge named Justice Amici, who wore his reading glasses on the very end of his nose, and had the unhurried manner of a man who had seen every variety of human motivation pass through his courtroom, and was surprised by none of it. Sam sat in the witness chair and looked at the room. To his left, Ikena sat in a dark suit, his new shoes replaced by even newer ones for the occasion. He had brought 3 family members as visible support, aunts or cousins Sam had never seen in his life, arranged in the gallery like a carefully constructed photograph of belonging. To his right, Chief Harlow sat alone. He had not brought staff or associates. He had simply come, as he had come to the hospital that evening, quietly, without apparatus, with nothing to prove. He sat with his hands folded and his eyes forward, and when Sam glanced at him, he gave the same small nod he always gave. Steady, certain. I am here. Izzy was in the gallery behind him. He had told her she didn't need to come. She had looked at him as though he had said something faintly ridiculous and arrived 20 minutes before the doors opened. Justice Amici leaned forward. Samuel Adiz, you have heard the arguments of both parties. You have heard the claims of your biological uncle and the response of Chief Richard Harlow. Before this court delivers its ruling, you have the right to speak. Who do you choose as your legal guardian going forward, and why? The fan turned overhead. A pen scratched somewhere. Outside, a vehicle horn sounded faintly and then faded. Sam looked at his hands for a moment. Then he looked up. My name is Samuel, he began. His voice was quiet, but the room was quieter. My mother and father died when I was 4 years old. I don't remember their faces clearly anymore. I try sometimes. But the images are blurry now, like a photograph left in the rain. He paused. What I do remember is Grandma Agnes. I remember her hands. I remember the sound of her grinding pepper at 5 in the morning. I remember her voice when she prayed over me at night, asking God to give me a future she couldn't see but believed in anyway. Room was completely still. I grew up on the streets of Ogbeat Market. I carried loads. I hawked ground nuts. I slept under a bridge when the single room we rented became too expensive. I was never in a classroom, but I learned. I learned through fences and torn textbooks and by watching and listening and refusing to believe that the life I was born into was the only life available to me. He glanced at Ikena briefly. Not with anger, with something more settled than anger. Man sitting there, he said carefully, shares my father's blood. I don't dispute that. And I want to say clearly that I don't hate him. I understand that life is complicated and that people make choices they cannot always explain. He paused. But I need to also say the truth. He was not there, not once, not for a single day of 8 years, not when I was sick, not when I was hungry, not when I was 4 years old and the only person standing between me and the street was an old woman with failing eyesight and a ground nut tray. He heard a sound from the gallery. He did not look up. He came when my name was in the newspaper. He came when there was something to arrive for. His voice was still level, still clear. I forgive him for that, I genuinely do, because I have learned that bitterness is a weight and I have carried enough weight in my life. He took a breath. But forgiveness is not the same as trust, and family is not the same as blood. He turned now toward Chief Harlow. This man found me crouching in the dirt outside his daughter's school, teaching her mathematics with a stick. He didn't have to stop. He didn't have to ask my name. He didn't have to do anything except drive past me the way every other person had driven past me for my entire life. His jaw tightened slightly. He stopped. Fan turned. The pen was still. He sat in a hospital waiting room for a boy who had no legal claim on him, no contract, no obligation. He just came. He moved my grandmother so I could see her every day. He sat on a concrete step beside me in the evening and called me son, not to impress anyone, not because cameras were watching, just because it was the true thing to say in that moment. Sam's voice remained steady, but his eyes were bright. I have spent my whole life knowing what it feels like to be looked past, to be invisible, to be the boy the world walks around. He looked directly at Chief Harlow. This man looked at me. Not at what I could become for him. not at what my story could do for his reputation, at me, at what was already there. He turned back to Justice Amici. Choose Chief Richard Harlow, not for his house or his school or his name. I choose him because of a waiting room and a concrete step and a small nod that said without a single word, I see you and I am not going anywhere. He folded his hands. That is what a father is. That is what I choose. Courtroom was silent for a long moment. Then Justice Amici removed his glasses, set them on the desk, and looked at Sam with the expression of a man who had delivered hundreds of rulings and knew, when the testimony had already made the ruling unnecessary. He picked up his gavel. This court finds no compelling legal or moral basis to disrupt the existing guardianship arrangement. The claim of Icona Adiz is hereby dismissed. Chief Richard Harlow retains full legal guardianship of the minor Samuel Adiz. This case is closed. Full struck, and from the gallery one sharp, deliberate clap rang out. Izzy. Obviously, outside the betrayed your roots by choosing wealth over family, Sam stopped on the bottom step. He turned to face the cameras with the same stillness he had shown in the school courtyard the day Tobe pinned his photograph to the notice board. He said 4 words. Love is thicker than blood. Then he walked into Chief Harlow's waiting arms and the cameras caught all of it, and by evening it was everywhere and none of that mattered at all. 10 years moved the way years move when they are full quickly, and with weight. Samuel Adiz, now known professionally as Sam Harlow, a name he had taken quietly and without ceremony 2 years after the courtroom, was 22 years old and stood in the middle of a construction site in Enugu's mainland wearing a hard hat and dusty boots, and the particular expression of a man who is looking at something that does not yet exist but can see it completely. He was a civil engineer, structural, specializing in affordable urban housing, the design and construction of dignified, durable, low-cost homes for communities that had been told for generations that decent shelter was not for people like them. His first completed project had been 12 units in the Ogbit area, built on land Chief Harlow had quietly acquired and donated. 12 small houses with real foundations, real roofs, real floors, not marble, but solid, smooth, permanent. On the day the first family moved in, a woman with 3 children stood in her new doorway and put her hand flat against the wall and pressed as though she was checking whether it was real. Sam had stood across the street and watched her and felt something move through him that he had no name for and did not try to name. He just stood there and let it move through him, and then he went back to work. Izzy had become exactly what the courtyard had predicted she would become, a fighter. She was a child education advocate now, having completed a law degree with the focused intensity of someone who had been quietly building towards something for years. She founded and ran 3 free learning centers across Enugu, open-air, resource-rich spaces built specifically for market children, street children, the children who pressed their faces against school fences and absorbed what they could from the outside. She called them window schools. The name had made Sam go very quiet when she told him. He had looked at her for a long moment and then said, "You remembered." "Never forgot," she said simply. The foundation had been Izzy's idea first, but it became theirs the moment she mentioned it. She had come to him one evening at the construction site, the second housing project, now underway in the Trans-Ekulu area, and sat on an overturned bucket in her court clothes and said, "I want to build something that lasts after we're gone. Something that tells the next Samuel that someone already made a path." He had looked at her from across the site. "What kind of something?" "A foundation, properly structured. Funding, facilities, advocacy, not just for street children, for their families too, for the grandmothers who sell groundnuts to keep them alive, for the mothers the world calls mad, for the ones everyone walks past." She paused. "We call it the Mango Tree Foundation." He set down the document he was holding. "Izzy, I know." I know, Sam." He looked at her for another moment. Then he picked his document back up. "I'll have the structural drawings for the first facility ready in 3 weeks, she smiled. "I'll have the legal framework done in 2. Launch of the Mango Tree Foundation happened on a Thursday evening in Enugu with more people in attendance than either of them had planned for. Word had spread the way word spreads when something is true, quietly at first, then everywhere at once. The venue was the courtyard of Sam's first completed housing project in Ogbit. They had strung lights between the buildings. Someone had brought a small sound system. Sister Bridget from Grandma Agnes's care facility had arrived early and organized the food with the calm authority of a woman who considered this well within her jurisdiction. Chief Harlow stood near the back of the gathering for most of the evening, watching. He had declined the seat of honor on the small stage. "This is yours," he had told Sam. "I'm just a witness." When the time came for speeches, Izzy went first. She stood at the microphone in a deep blue dress and looked out at the crowd with the steady gaze of someone who had learned that the most powerful thing you could do in a room was simply tell the truth clearly. "I was 12 years old," she began, "when I first saw a boy crouching in the dirt on the other side of my school fence. He was doing mathematics, not because a teacher told him to. Not because there was an exam coming, just because the numbers were there and his mind needed them." She paused. "I had been told all my life that I was not good at mathematics. I had private tutors, I had textbooks, I had every resource a child could want, and I was failing." She smiled. "And this boy who had none of those things saw my confusion through a fence and fixed it with a stick and 3 mango seeds." Laughter moved warmly through the crowd. "He didn't just teach me fractions that afternoon. He taught me something I have been unlearning my whole life, that intelligence has no address, that brilliance does not require a particular postcode or a particular pair of shoes, that the mind is the most democratic thing in the world. It goes wherever it is carried." She looked at Sam. "He carried his mind through conditions that would have broken most people, and then he used it to lift others. That is what this foundation is about. Not charity, not pity, opportunity, dignity. The simple, radical act of seeing people who have been made invisible and refusing to look away." Courtyard was quiet in that particular way that means everyone is listening with their whole body. Sam came to the microphone after her. He had no notes. He stood for a moment and looked at the crowd, and then he looked at the building behind him. The first one, the 12 units, the real floors and real roofs, and the woman who had pressed her hand against the wall. "I used to lie awake under a bridge," he said, "and count the sounds of the city, trucks, rain, market noise beginning before sunrise. I used to make up mathematics problems in my head to fall asleep because the numbers were quieter than the fear." He paused. "I didn't know then that one day I would use those same numbers to build walls for people who were sleeping where I slept. I didn't know that the bridge would become the blueprint." He looked at Chief Harlow at the back of the crowd. "One man stopped his car," he said. "That is all. He stopped and he looked and he did not look away. Everything you see tonight, these buildings, this foundation, whatever comes after it, started there. With one man who decided that a boy in the dirt was worth stopping for." He turned to Izzy. "And one girl who decided that a boy on the other side of a fence was worth talking to." He smiled. "Everything started at a fence and a mango tree. Tonight we plant more trees." Applause that followed was the kind that doesn't begin and end neatly, but builds and keeps building until it becomes something larger than itself. Later, after the crowd thinned and the lights burned lower, Sam found Grandma Agnes sitting in a chair near the edge of the courtyard, wrapped in a good wool shawl, Sister Bridget beside her. She was watching the remaining guests with the peaceful detachment of someone who no longer needed to understand everything in order to be content within it. Sam crouched beside her. She looked at him. Her eyes moved across his face slowly, carefully, the way they did now, searching, assembling. Then she said, "Samuel." He exhaled. "Yes." "Grandma, you did something good today." He said. "You helped, you kept me alive long enough to do it." She patted his cheek with a thin, dry hand. "I always knew," she said softly, "even when we had nothing, I always knew you were carrying something important." She closed her eyes briefly. "I just didn't know it would be this big." He covered her hand with his and held it there. Izzy appeared beside him, barefoot now, having abandoned her heels somewhere during the evening. She looked down at Grandma Agnes with an expression of uncomplicated love, the kind that builds slowly and without drama over years of shared ordinary moments. "She okay?" Izzy asked quietly. "She's perfect," Sam said. They stood together for a while, the three of them, as the courtyard grew quieter and the lights swayed gently overhead, and somewhere nearby Sister Bridget hummed something soft and tuneless, and the night settled around Enugu the way it always had, warm and vast and indifferent to human struggle, but somehow always leaving room for human grace. The following morning, the Mango Tree Foundation officially opened its first full facility. It was a bright, clean space in Enugu mainland, counseling rooms, a learning center, a safe house for children, a small medical bay. The reception area had a mural painted on the longest wall by a young artist from Ogbit whom Sam had commissioned specifically because he had spotted her painting on the side of a market stall 3 months earlier and stopped his car. The mural showed two children sitting under a mango tree, one in a school uniform, one in worn, dusty clothes, both leaning over a notebook, both smiling. Above them, in careful golden lettering, "Wounds can teach what textbooks cannot. Dignity is a human right. No one is too broken to be healed." Sam stood in front of it for a long time on the morning of the opening. Izzy stood beside him. They were wearing matching foundation shirts, cream with a small mango tree embroidered over the heart. "Does it look right?" she asked. He studied it carefully. The two children in the mural, the notebook between them. The tree overhead with its wide, patient branches. "It looks exactly right," he said. She nodded. Then after a moment, "Do you ever think about that first day at the fence?" He smiled. "Every day." "What do you think about it?" He was quiet for a moment. "I think about how close it came to not happening. How many people walked past that fence before you stopped? How many people saw me and kept walking?" He paused. "I think about how one moment one person choosing to stop instead of walk past became all of this." Izzy was quiet. "And then I think," he continued, "that the same thing is happening right now. Somewhere in this city there is a child at a fence, and whether someone stops depends entirely on whether they've been taught to see." He turned to look at her. "That's what we're building, not just houses, not just schools. We're teaching people to stop." The gates of the Mango Tree Foundation opened at 8 o'clock that morning. The first person through the door was a boy of about 10, barefoot, sharp-eyed, carrying a torn notebook under his arm. Sam stepped forward and crouched to his level. "What's your name?" The boy looked at him steadily, sizing him up with the careful assessment of a child who has learned not to trust quickly. Then he said, "Chitty, Chitty." Sam extended his hand. "Welcome, come in." Boy looked at the hand. Then he took it. And they walked in together. That evening, as the foundation's first day wound down and the staff began closing up, Sam slipped out through the side door and walked to the small garden at the back of the compound. There, planted at the center, was a young mango tree. He had planted it himself 3 weeks earlier, on the day the building was completed. It was still small, barely taller than he was, but it stood straight, and its leaves caught the last of the evening light and turned it gold. He took off his shoes, stood in the grass. The city hummed around him. Traffic, voices, the sound of Enugu going about its evening the way it always had, enormous and indifferent and full of 10,000 private stories unfolding simultaneously in 10,000 directions. Sam closed his eyes. He thought about a bridge, a mat on a concrete floor, a groundnut tray balanced in the morning heat, Grandma Agnes's hands, a fence, a girl on the other side waving too eagerly, a man on a concrete step who said, "Sit down, son," and meant something that had no simpler word than home. He opened his eyes and looked up at the sky where the first stars were beginning. "I made it," he thought. Not to anyone in particular. To the boy under the bridge. To his parents whose faces he could no longer fully remember but whose absence had shaped the exact outline of everything he had become. To Grandma Agnes who had sold her sewing machine so he could have a beginning. "I made it. And I'm not done." Footsteps on the grass behind him. Izzy sat down cross-legged at the base of the mango tree, looked up at him and said, "You're doing the reflective barefoot thing again." "I'm always going to do the reflective barefoot thing." "I know." She patted the grass beside her. "Sit down." He sat. The tree rustled lightly above them, small and young and full of a future it hadn't grown into yet. Somewhere inside the building, a child laughed, high, sudden, unguarded. The laugh of someone who had just discovered they were safe. Sam and Izzy sat under the mango tree as the stars multiplied overhead and the city breathed around them and the foundation's lights burned steady and warm behind them. And it had all begun with a hungry boy, a lonely girl, a stick in the dirt, and a mango tree. If this story moved you, drop a comment telling us which moment touched you most. Don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that where you start is not where you have to end. And if you haven't already, Please subscribe and turn on your notification bell so you never miss a story like this one. Thank you for watching. And remember, there is always a mango tree somewhere. You just have to stop long enough to find it.